reading and things like that. So, like, how did you?
I think I did a number of things. I should have done earlier, but I told them exactly what they should focus on. So I gave them questions, and I was like, you underline the answers in your books.
Okay.
And then once I started doing that, they knew what to focus on, and they knew what to start reading.
Okay.
So then it went better after I gave them those guides.
How much of the book did y'all have left by the time you got to that point?
There's 31
I couldn't
chapters.
remember. Were y'all on like chapter 9 or 10 or something by that point?
Maybe. We finished at chapter 22, and then we didn't read the rest, because the rest is all about socialism and stuff that they haven't learned yet. So they just read up until the part. Everyone dies after chapter 20. Chapter 22, everyone almost dies except the main character, and he goes off, and the book kind of takes a weird turn.
Right.
He becomes socialist.
Oh.
Which they haven't learned about. They hadn't at that point learned about socialism yet.
Okay. So y'all ended at chapter 22. Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. So before I get into my notes on class, I thought class went really well. What are your thoughts about class today?
Not that it went well. It's a typical lesson.
Really?
Yeah.
Nothing. And what was that? One of your higher cohorts? One of your lower cohorts?
I would say there's 4 or 5 in there who are consistently high, and then the rest are IEP or very low.
Okay, because there are only I want to say maybe 10 or 11.
There's 10, and it's
there today.
5 are really good, and then 5 are low IEPs.
Okay, I got you. How are they doing in your class as far as grades and then on assessments with you?
Oh, I have no idea. I'd have to look at my grade book. I don't know that. I would assume that the top 5 are doing really well and the bottom 5 not so well.
Really? Do you normally have to differentiate a lot for them in that class, or is everything kind of modified so everyone can complete it?
I would say that everyone can complete it. I give the ones who have an IEP extra time, but it's never really a problem. Some of it's missing work, which they always get caught up on because the special ed teacher will help them get caught up on the
right.
work. But
okay. Awesome.
I scaffold sometimes the questions that I ask. If I draw a popsicle stick and then someone who
I asked about that. What is the popsicle stick thing?
So all of their names are on popsicle sticks, and I just draw popsicle sticks at random. And then depending on who I draw, I choose a question depending on who I draw.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
So sometimes I'll ask something that's easy and it's already on the board. If it's someone like Samir or Dejan, then I ask a harder, tougher question.
Okay. Awesome. Go ahead, sir.
With the kids in the class, in terms of the grade, you said if they're the top 5, usually they probably do really well in the assessment, and sorry, it's okay. And if they're the IEP students, probably not as well. I'm just wondering, you talk about scaffolding. Do you differentiate? You said you give them more time. What do you think the reason is that they wouldn't do well in assessments?
Well, I don't know.
Just in class.
I don't know why they don't do well on assessments. I think one of those kids has an IEP, but probably those 4 would be eligible for one. They get 32, 40 consistently on their exams. I don't know. I give them review guides. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We do reviews in class. I give them review guides. I tell them to come see me after school. One of them, John, does, but the other is just nothing. So I don't know. And I wish I had my grades with me. I haven't memorized their grades. They could be doing well.
That's
you can see in the tracking wall on my wall too, exactly. But it is half on top, half on bottom.
Awesome. And then, so I think I'm going to start with the notes I had from class today. So I don't know if you remember the Big 7, and I'm going to just give you the quick one I have. I ranked your class or your lesson today on the Big 7, and so for rigorous content, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree.
6.
Number 1.
Where's 6 and 7? Oh, I see how it
Oh,
goes.
you got it? Okay, sorry. So, for number 1, it was rigorous content mastery. I put you at 3, stage 3, and I would love to know if you thought, today's objective was rigorous, or what your thoughts were.
I think there were rigorous elements of it. I think there was a lot of complex things that got introduced: colonization, imperialism, nationalism, militarism. Those are
the
all
4 factors. Okay.
Yeah, those are complex. They already had background on colonization and imperialism.
Right.
Nationalism and militarism were new. So like I think in that term, like to understand that, you have to have a lot of background knowledge.
Okay.
So I thought like that was pretty rigorous. But I mean, the lesson 2 was pretty easy. They just have to know those 4 things, and that's gonna set them up for knowing World War One.
Okay.
The rest of the week.
Where would you put them on that class that I saw, because I didn't see your other classes? Where would you put them for rigorous content mastery?
Wait, are you saying that they didn't master the objectives, or are you asking me if my objectives are
I'm just
rigorous?
asking you, like, if you thought your objective today was rigorous. So if you had to place your class today on one of these 5, where would you place
Do you
your
want to-
class? Do you understand what I'm asking?
Are you asking me to rate my objective or rate how my class was understanding the objective?
So your actual objective, if it was rigorous or not, and then if your class mastered that objective.
So was my objective rigorous?
Yes.
I'd probably say a 3. Did my
Okay.
class master that objective? I would say yes.
Okay.
4 or 5.
Okay. Awesome. And then for academic engagement, I would love to know, and that's the next one down. Because what we're trying to do is use this document. So I sent this to everyone, but I'm not sure if everyone like really like looked at it when I sent it in the cohort blast. But if I was looking at like academic engagement, how engaged do you think your students were today in the lesson?
I think, like, if you're doing it based on how often they raise their hands, like, not that many students raise hands because they know I do the popsicle sticks.
Mm-hmm.
So they wouldn't raise their hands unless I asked them to raise their hands.
Okay.
So I don't know. Like, when I did the popsicle sticks, everyone gave me an answer. No one said no, I'm not answering.
Right. Okay.
Everyone participated. Even the one kid I didn't call went to the board. So I don't know. I'd give myself a probably stage 4.
Okay. And then what about like student investment? The next one.
Interest in our working.
So stage 4? Okay. And then how do you define like interested and hardworking? Like what does that look like for you?
They work hard. They get their work done. They're on task during class. They got what they needed to get done. They got the math done with time to spare. No other class did that. They got the guided practice done exactly how they were supposed to. They moved on to the exit ticket. They just worked hard, and then they were.
What about outwardly, like physically? Like what does like interested and hardworking seem like to you besides like just getting it done and stuff like that?
Asking questions, I guess.
Okay. And then what about student communication? So I'm thinking about the way they answer questions because I know there is an expectation for how they answer questions with you. What stage would you place them on? And I'm thinking about like all student answers that you get from high to low.
Like 3. I feel like these are weird little like a 3.
Okay. You said it sounded weird. Why do you say that?
I just feel like these are kind of, I don't know. Like I don't think about this stuff when I teach.
And then, so that was the academic, like strands 1 through 4. The last 3 strands are like relationships, building, student leadership, and critical consciousness. I'd actually really like to know like where you think you would fall on those 3 as well in your class, then how you measure each one. So like, okay,
How
so
do
for
I measure
example,
relationships?
if you were to read the stages for relationships, where do you think you and your students would fall on relationship piece? Besides like knowing the surface information about your students and knowing even more personal information about them. And then going from there, building on the relationship in and outside of school past just academics.
Okay, what's the question?
So where do you
On
think
the-
your
on the
students...
number
Mhm.
5? Okay.
So, like, essentially, our region wants everyone to be in these stages here, but we understand that everyone's not. So, if we were looking at relationship building, would you say that 60% of students could state that they have some type of relationship with you that's past just, like, surface level, things like that? That's what I'm saying. So, like, with your students, do you feel like you have...
Past surface level.
So actual information about them. So if you were to read, so just read that one. Let me give you a second.
I really feel like I have a really good relationship with 100% of my students.
Awesome.
Past service level.
Okay.
I don't really know what you mean by socio-political context. I see that word a lot.
Okay. So when you're talking about, I guess when I'm thinking about their identity, who they are, the things that might impact their life, like knowing things like that and building. So using your relationship to talk about those types of things.
Okay.
I don't know, Vicky, maybe you can explain even more because I feel like, no, don't apologize. I feel like I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it so that you understand what I'm trying to say.
I feel like the relationships that I have with my students are my strong suit. Like, I feel like if I have to point out, like, one thing I do really well, it's building relationships with students. But I'm confused because I don't, the socio-political thing is kind of getting me, building lessons about their background is kind of, is that, like, I'm supposed to build lessons based on their background?
Or incorporating it.
Or incorporate their background into lessons. I don't necessarily feel like I need to do that to have a strong relationship, so it's difficult.
Right. And so I guess, first of all, I want to say, thank you for engaging in making sense of this because, we've been working with it for a long time and it's really complex. It's a lot of pieces, so I appreciate that you're, trying to make sense of it. And so, I guess, what we're saying in general is that for the same reasons like that you came to teach in America, right? And another individual for everyone, you know what I mean? But like the basic understanding of, I can probably assume that you two felt, compelled by the fact that, kids at a certain socioeconomic level and certain race were not, getting the equity education that we want to see, right? So, what we're just saying is in this piece, like, acknowledging that, knowing your students as deeply as you do, like, how then do you affirm what is in the context of their life, you know what I mean, as well as the content of your subject, to marry the two so that, to them it's, personal and meaningful and, you know what I mean, uplifting and relevant.
Okay.
Thank you, Vicky.
I don't know how I would have done that today. Talking about the 4 factors that led into World War I. I feel like I did bring in elements, if you looked at the worksheet, where I'm like, or I even gave examples, like, Diamond and David, you guys are an alliance, like that sort of thing. I don't know if I'm bringing in the background,
Okay, so are there times when you are able to bring in their backgrounds in your lessons? And would you say that that's like a majority of the time or just like a small percentage? And even if it's not when you're teaching in front of them, even outside of you teaching and then you all talking like after class or after school?
I don't know. Some lessons lend itself better than others. This lesson didn't really lend itself well to that.
Yeah.
Some of the lessons that we did in the jungle, I think, lended itself really well. But, like, I don't know. I mean, with history, I think it'd been definitely, I have no idea how I would do this in math. So that would be tough. History lends itself to this sort of things. Sometimes today wasn't one of those days.
Okay.
The rest of the week will probably not be one of those days.
Okay. What about student leadership? So essentially being able, and that's the next one down, essentially students having the ability to name what qualities of leadership are, naming qualities of leadership within other students leading like within your class, the things that they're doing outside of school.
Well, there's not a lot they can do. We don't really have extracurricular activities.
Right.
So leading outside of the classroom would be difficult. I definitely think leaders emerged in that class. I think it was very clear. Like, Samir is a leader. Leadership roles in their classes. What would a leadership role be in a class? Like,
So it could be something as simple as collecting papers, or it could be someone who is leading a part of the lesson for you. Do you know what I'm saying? I think whatever you think leadership is. And then, like, do you think that if you were to have a conversation with your students, they would be able to be like, oh, like, Samir's leader because he does this, 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 and this. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they'd be able to say that he was a leader, for sure.
And you think they could all probably do that with each other?
Like
So no, do you think all of your students could name leadership qualities in their peers?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, and then what about naming like leadership within their community or within their school or? It seems very abstract. I know it seems very abstract.
I don't know how I would know if they knew leaders in their communities.
So, like for example, if you're building relationships with your students, you know some of the things that they're doing outside of the school, right? If you know that some students are involved with like church or something else, like you know what I'm saying? Like, could they name like different leaders within that?
If they're involved in church, could they name their church leaders?
Yeah,
I
or
would
other
assume-
leaders in
I
the
would
community.
assume so.
Okay.
I've never asked them who their church leaders were.
Okay.
I had no idea. And my advice to her.
And I appreciate you trying to think through this,
With
but
that, though. Like, how
what do you mean?
Like if they can identifying leaders seems like a skill that I have like no part in.
But I feel like you could. So, like, for example, if I'm a history teacher, you could identify leaders historically, right? And then maybe if you were to apply that to, okay, so who are some leaders that we know now? Do you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
I'm not saying that it's completely separate from one another. I'm saying, like, building it
That makes more
into.
sense.
Okay. I probably just didn't do a very good job of explaining it.
I assume that they could look and be like, yes, that person is the leader. Okay, I get what you're saying better now.
Okay. And then the last one, which I think you could actually really do being a history teacher, critical consciousness. What are your thoughts about critical
I
consciousness?
would say almost everyone. I would say I'm like at a 4 or 5 there.
Okay.
I think we have conversations a lot about this sort of thing.
Okay.
Whether we're talking, like we had last week or 2 weeks ago, we talked about socialism, capitalism, and communism. And then just the way that they realized about the inequalities in capitalism and how communism and socialism would appeal to them.
What about in our society and how it would like directly impact them in their lives now?
What capitalism directly impacts their lives
So
now.
even not even capitalism, but when I'm thinking about being critically conscious, like do you think that your students could name and identify some of the pieces that affect them? Some of the societal pieces that affect them in their lives?
They realize that the inequality that is caused by capitalism directly impacts their life. And is that what you're asking?
I'm just asking in general. I'm not asking for anything like, I mean, I'd love to know like examples, but like when you're thinking about your classroom, like do you think students are becoming critically conscious of like their identity, how, you know, their identity affects them in society when they're going out, being able to apply some of the things from history and how it's playing out now, things like that, making connections.
I think one of the things about modern world history is that they realize that there's a set of winners and a set of losers, and how oftentimes they're in the set of losers, whether it's imperialism, which is the colonization of Africa, or whether it's when we learned about the jungle and the some immigrants to America, or even capitalism. It's just like a system are in place that create winners and losers, and how often that has been the case. But realizing why that has happened and resistance to that and ways that can change it, I think is important.
Do you think most of them understand that?
I would say almost all. I would give that a really high rating.
Okay.
That's pretty much all I do is talk about that kind of stuff.
I think that's great, Aaliyah.
Even today, today was World War I, but we did talk about imperialism, how they divided Africa without any African say between European countries.
Right.
That there's a system of power and exploitation that takes advantage of African population.
And I just wanted to share like why we put that emphasis on there, probably the same reason why you feel like you know, that's all you talk about, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to hear in your
Well,
words.
it makes it so interesting too to realize and even if you look at this is one of the only things I care about. When you look at the history textbooks, and then what it says in the textbook versus what actually happened is a huge disparity between that. And then we can get into bigger conversations about who writes the textbooks, why are they biased? We talked about the Filipino-American War, and I told them read the book. What does it say about the Filipino-American War? It basically says there was a war between Filipinos and Americans for independence. That's all it says. And then we looked up primary sources, testimonies of people who experienced it firsthand, and they saw it was a massive genocide. 1.4 million Filipinos were massacred. Anyone over the age of 10 was killed. And it's just once they start reading that and becoming aware of how much history is hidden from us deliberately, I think that becomes a very interesting topic.
Why do you think it's good for them to do that? From your heart, you know what I mean? Why do you spend time on that?
Critically conscious.
I know.
Right?
but like, why do you think that's important to their life? Why do you think it's relevant? Why do you think it's, something that you should build skill into them?
Because you always should question what the information we're receiving is, and dig deeper. Don't accept the first answer that's given to you. I think that's an important thing to learn. Just empowers them, I think.
And it does. And I just want to share too, like, especially for our brown and black kids, right? When you said they're often understanding that they're on the side of the losers, you know what I mean? And you said an important part and how they can change that, right? You know what I mean? Because we just see that over and over, we might start to believe that we're losers. Versus, you know what I mean?
Well, and then we have conversations all the time about like how that's so wrong too. Like we look at advertisement and it's like we looked at advertising for Pear soap, and once Pear soap was introduced to Africa, Africa became civilized. I'm like, guys, why is this offensive? Like on so many levels, this is offensive. Like the first human being ever was from Africa. Africa had the richest civilizations in history. Africa has like 10,000 years of history that's greater than Europe could ever be. So why are they saying this? Like this is offensive on this many levels. And you can get into deep conversations like that.
You can.
I wish we had saw those lessons.
Yeah. She said, if anything, that's that lesson.
So do I, but I know there's things I'm missing.
One thing that I think had a big impact on them is I found a map of like all the kingdoms that were in Africa prior to imperialism. And then I said, this is what Africa would look like if it was never colonized. Like the borders just look totally different. But these are the borders that the Europeans drew, and these are the borders that are still in place today in Africa. So it's very interesting to see how that power manipulated Africa between the European powers with no regard for those African kingdoms. Some African kingdoms were divided between 3 European powers, which, sorry, I get really
I love how, look, in my mind I'm just sitting, I was like, go ahead, Leah, go ahead and finish. That is awesome that you're so passionate about it, though.
Do
you know what I'm saying?
I don't know. Yeah, I like that kind of stuff.
And how do you think what your disposition is affects the quality of relationships that you have?
They get excited when I get excited. So when I'm like running around the room screaming about how Pear soap is offensive, like they get into that and they like start agreeing with me and stuff. But like as I said, like not every lesson lends itself to that. Imperialism, fantastic for that. Socialism, communism, whatever, capitalism, perfect for that. Things like what led to World War I. I mean, there was that imperialism background to it, and once we start realizing that there was fighting in the colonies, we can do more of that, but not every lesson can do that.
Wow. Thank you. Look, thank you.
If anyone will listen to my history rants, I'm happy.
I love it. Okay, well then I'll get into, my notes are pretty quick. Honestly, Leah, I highlighted a lot. I think it's great that you gave them a mnemonic device for the 4 factors. Students had an opportunity to use context clues to figure out what militarism, is that how, did I pronounce that correctly? Is. You gave them the opportunity to stop and think through what they were learning and how it applies. I love that you used pictures to show what militarism was or might be. What else? The urgency and the timing. I thought it helped to keep students on task when you only gave them like the 3 minutes to get their stuff down in their groups and then to write it down on the board. Complimenting the groups on some of the responses that they came up with and put it on the board. I thought was fantastic. And then having students ask questions and make materials and make connections to materials out loud. I thought that those were really a lot of your strengths, and those are things that I've seen normally. And then the use of your map to show them the alliances of Germany, even though she really, at first she couldn't name them, but then she could. I thought that was a great visual. And then, so I had a couple of questions, but I was wondering, I know you and I have had brief conversations after observations before, and then I've sent notes, be them late, I apologize for that, but kind of with questions. And so the last time I sent notes, I had a bunch of questions outlined, and I never got yours back for that, and I kind of wanted to know, what your thoughts were, or if you think that some of the feedback that I've given you feel applies to you, or maybe some of the next steps or anything like that you feel like you can actually use, or do you feel like some of the things that I have given you haven't really been what you really need, or where are you with my notes and some of my input just being in your class once every 2 months?
Yeah, I think number one, I'm confused about what I need. Like I don't like I look at this and I'm like I don't
This
get
is only
it.
for the first time I've given this.
Okay.
The other notes that I gave you, I just put in questions and the root causes and the next steps. I put in questions around like visions and then like asking you what you thought about like the notes overall. So this is actually the first time that I've actually used that. The other one was just me asking you questions.
Okay, I'd have to look at those notes again before I respond. But if I was like to think of like next steps for today's lesson,